Greetings. Welcome to this presentation by Group 6 on the PPI and the possible impact of tariffs. Now, I wish to preface this whole presentation beforehand with a bit of a disclaimer. We've had one member of this group who is not named, as we want nothing to do with him. He isn't even part of the project, basically to us. We have given him our information, our contact info. We heard nothing from him. The same group member has tried to sabotage and torpedo this whole thing by using a ChatGPT prompt. We wanted nothing to do with it. We caught it, reported it. We wanted nothing to do with it. And I just learned that he apparently did not know we had to do a video because he just put it on the discussion board after I announced I'm doing a video. Buddy. Well, anyway, I just wish to put a bit of a disclaimer out though for Kevin Hunt. So the way we kind of organize this is we Kevin and I met up. We're the only two that can kind of meet up on this. Jatavion's out in Chicago, so we met up and we talked. But turns out Kevin had to do a 70-page paper, 70 pages. So Jatavion and I decided to basically take up his slack. So Jatavion mainly did the paper, I've done the presentation, and Kevin has helped out when he can. I still want him to get the credit he deserves. He has earned the credit. He deserves it because he may not appear, let's say, in the history of like the paper or the presentation, or even in like this. His work still lingers and it's still there. You just can't really see it because we communicate mainly in text right now, and Jatavion has been using Kevin's analysis from the analysis prompt on the discussion board for the last two paragraphs in our paper. So the conclusion and the paragraph before that, basically, you could say were written by Kevin. So he just hasn't been as active as you say he should be. That's because he has a massive paper that, all honesty, he should be working on that and not this. So Jatavian and I just wanted to make sure that he didn't have to worry about this that much. One less thing on his plate. So I just want to get that out of the way. So this is the PPI and the impact of tariffs. Now we can finally continue. So thank you. Thank you for listening to that. So our topic, the initial ideas that got thrown around for this was kind of like how is the current economic situation influencing the American consumer? How is it affecting them? And then I got the idea, hey, how about we've been hearing a lot of stuff about tariffs. How about we do something about that? Okay, well we can't do generic tariffs, which was the initial thing because we didn't have any plan on after that. And it was after Kevin and I got together that we decided to get a couple ideas together, and we asked if Jatavian was okay with it, and he said he was. So what we basically decided on is looking at the current retaliatory tariffs being placed on the U.S. by Canada and the China, and how that would affect the PPI of various American goods and manufacturers. So the PPI is the Producer Price Index. Actually, I'm going to move on here. The Producer Price Index is kind of like basically the opposite of the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index. Consumer Price Index is basically the amount of money consumers have to pay for a a good. PPI is basically the same thing but for producers. How much a producer has to pay for a good, at least to make a good. Excuse me. Pardon me. I don't want to pause this. I have to do something real quick. I apologize. I don't know how to pause this. Still here, by the way. Apologies for that. Got a message. Had to deal with it. Someone's trying to call me. Anyway, so we decided to take PPI data from the Federal Reserve Economic Data site, and we decided to do 5 different products: sorghum, corn, soybeans, uh, metal products. I believe we did iron and steel, and then wheat. So here's three of the four. Sorry, three of the five. And the common trend you can see here is pre-pandemic, the levels were relatively stable. So, say sorghum here, corn, soybeans, and then we then see is right after when the pandemic hit in early 2020, probably around May or so, it just spiked. And then it eventually it plummeted down a bit. It moved down, and then it decided to spike again in late 2021, early 2022, and it's basically becoming pattern with these three. And since mm, early 2022, it's kind of it's gone back down, but it hasn't reached the levels of pre-pandemic TPI. So as a bit of an oddity here, these last two, the metal and iron products, iron and steel, and the other farm product, wheat. Iron and steel, we don't have any PPI data for uh, 2015 or 2016. So it only starts in 2017, and it rose a bit in over 2018 near the end, but then it went back down. And then right after, it actually took a bit more time than the other products, and this time it just shot right up, just like all the rest of them. But relatively has just decreased since that initial spike. Now, wheat on the other hand, wheat has stayed relatively stable as like everything else. But unlike the other two, if I go back here for a second, go back one slide, the rest of them kind of had a just dramatic increase to their PPI. Wheat, on the other hand, kind of went up gradually. And then in early 2022, it had its own spike, and then went back down right after, and it slowly made its back. Actually, it's pretty close to pre-pandemic levels. If you look at here compared to the other ones, uh, soybeans is the same way, corn's the same way. Like they're getting close to the pre-pandemic levels, but they haven't reached them yet. And this is, uh, mind you, this data comes from January to January of each year. I regret doing that. I should have done March to March, as that would include the announcement of the tariffs that were announced at the beginning of this administration's term. I wish I would have done that. I regret it. I'm not replacing everything because that means we're done with my calculations. I'm not doing that at this stage. So these are our two tariffs. The Canadians placed a 25% uh, reciprocatory, reciprocatory, I just screw it. 25% retaliatory tariff on American goods, and because the U.S. had actually put a 25% tariff on the Canadians, so the Canadians had basically gave them the equivalent of the tariff Uno reverse card and gave them 25%. Chinese decided to give us a 147.6% tariff on our goods of U.S. goods going into China, as after we decided to put I want to say it was an 87%, and it actually got hiked up to like 125. So this 125 tariff is what caused the 147.6 tariff. So those are the sources for those. This is the idea. This is what we use to help calculate some of the stuff. Yeah, you might read on the paper. But so as I said, I regret doing January to January. I should have done March to March. I regret it. I should have done that. I thought university might be interesting, but I regret it. But I got all the data from every single January that we uh, went over for this for every single product, and then I calculated the inflation rate for each product, and the inflation rate. I'll get down to that in the next slide. But I calculated the inflation rate by subtracting the past. Say I'll use sorghum here as an example. I subtracted the previous year from the current year and divided that uh, answer by the previous year times 100, and that's how I got the 28% here. Basically, you did the CPI formula for inflation rate, what you just changed it for PPI. That's basically what it was. So on analysis, it's basically what I've gone over, but pre-pandemic levels, PPI remained relatively steady from 2015 to 2020. The average of inflation rate was around 2.2 and 2.8%, somewhere between there. And then it spiked right after COVID hit, and the post-COVID levels are more than a couple of them. We could say more than double. I wouldn't say double. I should remove that, and I haven't. They peaked in early 21, fell throughout 2021, and then peaked even higher in 2022. So if we go back here, couple slides, they peak in 21, decline, decline, decline until early 2022 when they start going back up again. Now, what happened in early 2022? For one thing, we had the war break out in Europe. Russia invaded Ukraine. That didn't help matters any. So that actually tracks, actually. Yeah, that actually tracks. Okay, that makes sense. I actually realize that now. That's why that second moment spike is the war in Ukraine. More disruption on the world stage, just messing with the economy. But the post-pandemic levels throughout 2024-2025, it seems to stabilize until the beginning of 2025, which we'll see how that happens. I did change it at one point just to see possibly what would happen if I did uh, uh, change the month from January to March, and it turns out it hasn't changed very much. It's basically, if you look as an example here, looking at say wheat is basically stayed the same as it is here. It over the next couple of months for February and March of 2025, it hasn't really changed at all. Conclusion: the introduction of China, basically the introduction of Chinese tariffs are going to be decreasing the PPI for the American export. It's very possible because the Chinese and the Canadians are uh, Chinese and Canadians in general. The people are deciding to buy domestically made goods instead of buying our goods, which is going to hurt our exports. And something else is that our policymakers need to take action because we are currently basically starting a trade war, and we need to kind of do damage control, and they are not. And we could very well into economic stability. So yeah, we're currently in a trade war, and I would like to read an excerpt from one of my partners' analyses, I should say. This is from Kevin Hunt, one of my group partners. The tariffs are hurting the farmers and metallurgy workers, and that is what is being intended by Canada and China. The US did install these tariffs first, and many are beginning to hurt because of this, and we have yet to see the federal government step in and do something to aid these workers. If they continue to sit idly by, it could result in much worse. Without the funds to operate, these farms cease to exist, and if these farms cease to exist, famine begins. Obviously, These are the worst doomsday scenarios, but there are farms already being forced into closing due to these reactionary tariffs. As much as I hate to write it, Canada and China are only giving the USA what was done to them first. The problem is that Canada and China so far have been supported by their constituents, other countries, and the federal governments far more than the USA has so far, which is why we don't hear the panic from these countries in international media currently, and why the Trump administration is already discussing walking back the tariffs he originally uh, instated. And currently, he has walked them back at least for a 90-day period, has put a pause on the tariffs, which is very, very nice. So we haven't been able to see if there's any problems with tariffs, how they're going to impact, but in a way, the impact has already been felt by the consumer because I would say there's a lot of producers currently who are kind of panicking and they just don't know what to do. But only time will tell. See how this really hurts us. And before we go, I'd like to give our references for this project, for this topic. We have our Fed data sources for each one of our commodities. Then we have our references for our tariff numbers, percents. So thank you for listening to this project. I hope you learned something from it, and I will. Goodbye.